Hi everyone, Lisa here. Thanks for joining me yet again. Let's be creative and get into this week's lesson.
Today I'm going to talk about washes and finding your way with watercolour and how wet that you want to work. So a lot of people worry about getting shapes exactly right when they're doing watercolour, but just remember watercolour can be a very free and loose medium. So if drawing is not your thing, I would suggest, and I've drawn a feather here, quite detailed, but if it's not your thing, that's fine. This is a medium that's very forgiving and allows you to actually create art without such strong boundaries and borders and definitive lines. So that's my defined feather. And underneath here, I'm just going to put the spine alone in. And I'm not even going to put it all the way in. I'm just going to put in like a little line to actually represent it. And I can see from here, so I could have drawn this on a spare piece of paper, but I can see generally round about the shape that I want to work within. Now, I've done loose and not so loose, more controlled painting before, but this is taking it a step further. I want to show you the difference between really using watercolour. I'm just wetting it here. Sorry, I live near an airport. I want to show you the difference between control with drawing. Now I've wet the page, but you can see that I haven't wet it that much or out excessively past my drawing edge. So I still have a lot of control as to where that colour runs, which is what I want with this technique. I'm just going to be doing some soft feathery strokes at the end here. And I might pop in a secondary colour. I can create the illusion of looseness by leaving gaps and by softening the border. So leaving areas of white paper actually loosens up the painting without, like I'm still filling in the lines is what I mean. Might put a little bit more in over here. Just want it darker along the spine a little bit. So I'll leave that to dry. Can't help myself. And now here. So if I'm not really big on drawing and I just want to play with colour and water, the difference can be quite substantial. But the thing is, when you're a beginner, you don't think to do this so freely. So what I would do is I would think of this as a country and that's its border or a jigsaw puzzle piece. But here, my intention is to not have such strong form. So I'm just going to create a larger boundary to my country and I'm going to wet this entire area, which is way out past where this feather goes to. And I'm going to use firstly a bigger brush. That means that I can't get stuck into little details because my brush physically won't let me. I'm going to use the same colours as a comparison. Now I can see by that not travelling too much that I haven't put enough water down. Now it's travelling. You can see immediately the difference that it makes. Don't be alarmed that I'm not keeping in alignment with this feather. This is totally different, and the reason why you want to use this technique is because you don't want to colour in between the lines. You like to colour and do watercolour, but you don't necessarily like to draw. So the beauty of watercolour, I think, is that it allows people who either don't have an interest in drawing or you might, just not be able to draw well and you've always tried it and you don't get it. Now, I would leave that at that stage and let it begin to dry. The reason is because the more detail you add in, the more the brain starts to analyse it and questions arise. Oh, how come that's longer than that side? How come that's darker? What's happening here? What's happening here? So we need to learn, if you're doing this technique, you need to learn to minimise your brush strokes and pull back, really hold back on adding lots of information. It's not to say that you can't build up to it as you go, but that was my initial laydown of colour, and I feel like I've already borderline done a bit too much. So this is drying now, and while this is drying, I will come back up to here and talk about the things that I would then add in to this painting to build this feather up.
This is really to show you that you don't have to draw first. You can actually kind of draw with your paintbrush as you go.
So I'm just mixing up the two colours I've already used, which is the phthalo blue, phthalo green, with a little bit of a magenta-y colour, just to use on the spine. Notice as I'm painting in the spine here, I'm leaving gaps, and what that does is it loosens up the painting. The thing you can do is vary the width of the line, so as long as it's not consistent, and even uneven little bumps here and there help loosen it up. So what I'll do now is I'll just create a little bit more information in this one. And you see how I'm moving the paper to suit the natural curve of my hand. That's an important thing to do. It gives you a more natural line. It's not forced. And I'm just going to add a few little quite fine detailed lines because it suits the nature of how I want this feather to look. Just because we add detail to a feather to make it look a certain way doesn't mean that it still can't be identified being painted much looser. So now that I've done that one, let's look at this bottom one here. You can see the paper's still a bit damp, but I've decided I'm just going to add a little tiny bit more information to give it a bit of finesse. And remember, the main thing with this technique is working loosely and reduce the amount of detail that you do add in, because you don't want to have to draw. So here I am starting with the main spine. I've broken it up. I'm not like that one, but I'm just doing little bits here and there. Now I choose to just add a tiny little bit of indication of individual little striations of feathers. With me, I am a realist at heart, so I'm just going to add a few little darker bits in just to give me some definition on that bottom edge and there, and that will be it. You don't need to give as much information, and I didn't draw. I just let the paint where it sat on the paper guide me around my shape in general, and then, you know, using a bigger brush, you can't do too much, but I felt like I just wanted to add little bits here and there to make that feather look more like a feather. So there you have it. I hope it helps, and have a lovely week and be creative. See you next time.